Muslims make up the backbone of the country. You know, the only problem is, so the Muslims don't know their own strength.
There was a figure that was calculated. I think it was something, I can't remember what the figure was, and it was a big number. I think it was something like £100 million a year comes from them, and I think it was the Muslim community a year, especially in Ramadan, gets generated, and all of that money goes abroad.
The political decision was made by the man who had political power. Now, what we have now today is we have all of this leadership by ulama. And of course, as Muslims, we hold the ulama in high respect because these are the men that contain the knowledges. And we love them for it and we respect them for it. But they are in positions of knowledge, not in positions of power.
There's too many people that feel like that, you see like people, you get keyboard warriors online, you get people fighting with each other, right? Somebody's making a point. And the one thing that people will always come back with, and especially men do this, go and get a real job.
Of course not. So if one changes one's perspective on reality and goes back to the core of what this existence is and what we are dealing with, then you start building the strength to do other things. And when you can change your fear of provision and change your fear of rejection and change your fear of humility and all these fears that we have, when you can, we say fear Allah, but what does that mean? It means that all other fear should be gotten rid of, so there's only the fear of Allah left.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things is going into war. If you're going into war, and I'm talking not just like, commercial warfare, but I'm talking you're going into war fi sabilillah. And once again, I'm not calling out to, all of these things. I'm looking at it from a philosophical perspective. But if you're going into war, you have to trust and believe in what you're fighting for. Otherwise, it's over. You're gonna pee yourself and run off the battlefield.
Yeah, the whole facing death thing is interesting, because that whole kind of because that you would, if you were in that culture, you get to 11, 12, 13, 14 years old and you have to face your mortality. You've only got Allah left at that point, and you do that, you become a completely different human being.
Let's also take that onto, let's take that also on a much lesser level, right? Because going to war is hectic. There's a whole other thing, and it's very extreme, and it's the extreme example of making a point. But if you take it on a much smaller example that most of us, if not all of us, have experienced, right? You travel to a country that you've never been to before, and you don't speak the language, right? And it's awkward, it's difficult. It's like, you're trying to make sense of where you're at and what's happening, etc., etc. But you always make it through. Somehow you're always all right. You'll find a place to eat. And especially as Muslims, I have an example now that I was, a couple of months ago, I flew to America, and it was my first time there. I was in Arizona, and we were out in the north of Arizona, and we had to get back to Phoenix to get our flight and leave. And the person that was dropping us off had to drop us off like 5 hours before our flight. And so he said, well, look, I know there's a mosque here and there's a restaurant next door, so I'm going to drop you there and you can chow whatever, and then you can do your prayers and you can take an Uber to the airport or whatever. And I was like, yeah, cool. We had our dinner, and then we crossed the road and we went to the mosque, did whatever, and we did our prayers. Then it turns out that it's time for Isha, and like all of these guys come into the mosque fills up. There's a lot of Somali guys, and joining the prayer, afterwards, Assalamu alaikum, then the guys are greeting us, where are you from? From South Africa, from England, South Africa, whatever. Oh, what you doing here? It's like, oh yeah, I lived in South Africa. I'm like, huh? It's like, yeah, I lived in Cape Town. Where did you stay? And it was like there was automatically a connection.
Yeah.
And then in the shortest amount of time, the one guy was like, oh no, that guy's an Uber driver. He'll take you to the airport. Just like rather than doing it through Uber, just do it straight with him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, yeah, fine. Yeah, let's do that. Wonderful. So we go to the other guy, we tell him, and he's like, you're travelers? I said, yeah, we're travelers. I said, no, then I can't take any money. I'll drop you there for free.
Wow.
you know. And he took us to the airport, and I was just like, I mean, that's how it is with the Muslims. You know what I mean? It's like wherever you go in the world, there's always a mosque, there's always food, there's always somebody that's going to look after you, and that's just.
When I was doing the post, I was doing a post on Facebook like 3 years ago, and I was writing about like how, you know, the dollar's going to collapse and the world's going to change, and we're going to have this new multipolar world, and all these things are going to happen. The biggest reason why people were really kind of fighting with me and having a go at me was because what they were worried about was, where is that provision going to come from? You know, they were because there's such that it's such a, like, it's Stockholm syndrome. You know, like, it's such an ingrained belief that what actually props us up is the dollar, what props us up is the bank, what props us up is the pound or the euro or whatever. And you know, but the thing is, it was a really good learning point for me, because what I realized was, wait a minute, I need to actually start showing people the other side. And then, you know, I had to actually explain that, you know, like, if the United States Federal Reserve, if it collapses, and if, you know, Credit Suisse collapses and Deutsche Bank collapses, if all these banks collapse, you know, like, the trees are not going to stop giving oxygen. They will still continue to give oxygen, you know, and like, water's not going to stop flowing. It will still flow, you know, and sheep will not stop grazing. They will still graze. You'll still be able to go, and you'll still be able to breathe. You'll be able to walk outside and still be able to breathe the air in. It's not like the sky's going to collapse. You know, it's not like, tomatoes are going to stop growing. These things will still continue. Is that we've been taught so much that, like, you know, it is, as you say, it's shirk, as you say, because it's like a godlike belief. It's like a godlike iman in the bank, in the currency, that this is the thing that keeps me alive. This is the thing that keeps me breathing. And so when you mention that thing to people and say this thing's going to disappear soon, they can't breathe. That's the issue. And it's getting people to understand that, you know, these things are, it's not that there isn't going to be difficulty. Of course there will be difficulty. You know, maybe there'll be less food on the shelves. Maybe it won't be as easy to get hold of nappies for the kid because they haven't turned up from China, or maybe we'll have a loss of power, or maybe your WhatsApp won't work, or you won't be able to browse videos on TikTok or whatever. It's not that there won't be difficulty. But the thing is that, it's not that there won't be anarchy that comes with it. You've probably seen a lot of anarchy lately in South Africa. It's not that the anarchy won't come with it, but a lot of the anarchy is driven by fear. If people weren't so afraid, you wouldn't have as much anarchy.
Well, one of the things, I mean, you mentioned South Africa now, and I truly feel that South Africa is going to be perfectly fine. Why?
Really?
Because the people are resilient. Yeah, but the people are resilient. I mean, you've got to understand the context of the population here. It's like, we have this thing called load shedding, right? Which is absolutely fantastic. So every the central electricity, I don't know what's the correct term, servers or whatever it is, you know, the production of electricity in South Africa is restricted to certain hours of the day. Now we have an app which tells us which times we have electricity and which times we don't have electricity.
Wow.
So depending on what schedule they're using, they will switch off a whole district, and it's just a boom, it's a blackout. And then it will go to they'll turn that one on, and they'll go to the next district, and boom, blackout. And that happens across the entire country.
Wow.
Right? That's what we're currently experiencing. At the certain times, we can be up to 12 hours a day without electricity.
That's
in 4-hour slogs, if it's really bad. So you have a 4-hour slog at night, and then another 4-hour slog 6 hours later, and it goes through that. And it's just become part of normal life, and people laugh about it, and it's an absolute joke, because they also switch off the traffic lights. You know, so you're like driving through town, and it's just like...
and the cameras are not working, so you can be speeding and stuff and everything, right?
Gridlock everywhere. It can be hilarious. It's also very horrible and frustrating, right? But what does that do to the population? It builds resilience, because people, I mean, there's a term in South Africa called boer plan, which is like, literally, it means the farmer makes a plan. But it's this idea that you deal with whatever's coming your way, and you make a plan, and you get your way out, right? And I mean, that's what we're dealing with now with electricity. 3-4 years ago, we had a major drought where you couldn't even like turn on your taps, right? Because there was such a shortage of water, especially in Cape Town.
Wow.
And again, people just deal with it. You find a way of working around it. You have your water for a little bit, and you have you don't need a half an hour shower. You can have a 10-minute shower,
You just
1 minute shower, and still be clean, right?
Yeah.
And everyone just learns how to be resilient.
You see, we don't have
the
that
other
level
side
of discomfort. You know, the problem with the West is because we don't have it's discomfort that builds resilience. Is because what it's agitating the nafs. And so you learn to conquer it, you learn to lower it, and then your heart becomes more alive. That's the thing that we don't have in the West. We don't have discomfort.
Well, the other side of South Africa is also rampant crime.
Yeah, that's scary though.
Don't get me wrong, it's scary.
Yeah.
It's scary, and there's certain places you don't want to go unless you know people, and even if you know people, you still don't really want to go there because it is dangerous. Right, but everyone who lives in South Africa is aware that there is crime. So you're when you go out, or when my wife goes out, or you're just like you're vigilant, and you're like, okay, where are you going? All right, cool, yeah, just like keep your phone on, make sure your phone's charged, whatever, right? But everyone in South Africa is just aware of it, which means that you're facing. Again, I mean, in the South African context, if you're in the wrong place, you are genuinely facing your death. But it's building like that inner strength. And now you talk to people in the townships, you talk to people who live there in some of the worst areas in South Africa, which means it's really some of the most dangerous places in the entire world. And those people are resilient. Those people do not fear death in the same way.
Survive in the new economies, If we have
that's what I'm saying.
Economic devastation, they will survive. It won't be us who are living comfortable lives.
And what's the underlying factor? They believe in God.
Yeah. Because it builds your strength.
And they know that
it builds your faith in Allah even more.
Exactly. Now, if you take the United Kingdom as a case study, right? Now, everyone is aware that the utilities are just like going sky high. I was speaking to somebody there who is in the energy world, and he was telling me like, no, the prices are going to keep going up, and it's going to get very, very, very difficult. And there was a lot of fear over last winter that people weren't going to be able to stay warm. Now, at the point at which people can't pay for their central heating, that's a big problem. Now people are freezing, and the old people are going to literally freeze to death. And there's all of these like compounding things on top of the fact that just going to this,
lots of things are closing in. Yeah, you see, like what happened here was when the pandemic took place, right? After the pandemic took place, there was this kind of collective, like the pandemic's come to a lot of places. Like the pandemic when the pandemic went to Pakistan, realistically the pandemic was only in a couple of cities in the major areas, and even then it was kind of a superficial lockdown. There'll be a few days where you get in trouble or whatever, but people just kind of got on with it, right? We in the UK we had very real lockdowns. It was very real. I mean, you could get in some serious trouble if you're not wearing a mask, or if you're contact or whatever, you could be facing jail time or a massive fine or whatever. It was very, very real. But what happened after the pandemic is people suppressed that and pushed that down inside of themselves, and basically tried to find a way to forget it, right? And so what happened after that was people went back to living a normal life, right? Jet setting around the world and going out and buying the fancy cars and building an extension on the houses and doing all these kind of things. It's like life just goes on and you just go back, right?
Yeah.
And you could say, oh, well, that's coming from a place of resilience. They got through the pandemic and they're just trying to get back out there and they're just trying to do that thing. The reality is what they're actually doing is trying to escape. They haven't faced that trauma. They've not faced that brutality or whatever it was. What they're actually trying to do is like the guy who comes home, after he's had a lot of tragedy or whatever, and he turns to the drink. That's what this is. It's finding a way to intoxicate yourself so you can forget what came before you. That's what's going on. And the problem with that is that it's not coming from a place of resilience. So when all of this goes to pot, you're not in any position to be able to cope with it because you've been ignoring it. You've been running away from it. That's the problem.
Right. And this is why, and I'm sure you're on a similar thought pattern. That's why part of why I've created this course and part of what I'm calling too, which is taking that journey now
Yeah.
to the self.
Yeah.
And I've divided it in 4 parts. The first part is the journey to the self and the stages of the journey. The second part is the time we live in and how we got here. The third part is using Western classical music as a case study for means of transcending this reality. And then the fourth part is, okay, given the fact that we're on the journey to the self, we understand the time we live in, and we know that there are ways that you can transcend this reality and like raise yourself up to a higher frequency, then what do you do moving forwards? And I've set out this, what I've called the heroic path or the heroic way, which are 10 principles that you need to be nurturing so that you're going to thrive in the oncoming chaos, because the chaos is coming.
The chaos is
coming. I mean, you're talking about the dollar and whatnot. I mean, it's a matter of time. And one thing that I also say at the end is that it's just a matter of time. Now, that may be a month. It may be a year. It may be a decade. It may be 100 years. It may be 200 years, right? We don't know. These transitions in time, they happen gradually and they happen over time. But if it happens tomorrow, you want to be prepared now. And if it's going to happen in 100 years' time, then you want your grandchildren to be prepared. Do you know what I mean? Because it's coming one way or another.
Yeah.
And like, if you want your descendants to be on the forefront, which everybody does,
like the
it's
volcano.
like part of
The volcano is going to erupt at some point.
But you were telling me something about a volcano.
Yeah, so I was just saying, like, it's naive if you think that the volcano is never going to erupt and you don't make any preparations for it. Then that's just naive. It's going to erupt. It's just a case of when.
Right, but if the news is telling you that this volcano is not going to erupt, and there's one mad guy in the town, and this mad guy is running around screaming at everyone saying this volcano is going to erupt, the volcano is going to erupt, but the king saying the volcano is not going to erupt, the news is saying the volcano is not going to erupt, TikTok saying, don't worry about the volcano, just keep dancing and doing going boogieing down.
TikTok, Twitter is saying we've been here for hundreds of years. This volcano has never erupted. We don't even know what it looks like. We read all the books. No books have ever mentioned that it was going to erupt. That volcano is solid. We haven't got any climate change on the horizon. We've got this and all that. Blah blah blah. So all these people are saying this. You got one guy saying it's going to erupt. That person gets seen as a lunatic
until it erupts.
Until it erupts, and then that guy who's a lunatic, he's also very bitter and very angry at everybody. He's like, I flipping told you so. You don't listen to what I'm saying to you.
Well, I don't think, because if that man that was saying that it's going to erupt and nobody listened to decided, you know what, enough's enough. I'm taking my family and my 3 closest friends, the people that actually believe in me, and we're going to go move to another place. And they go and move to another place, and they live happily ever after, and everyone else ends up in Vesuvius 2.0.
Honestly, that's what life is like. Life is very similar to that for me. I mean, I'm not in a position to pick up and go there, because you can't escape the banking system. You can't escape fiat currency. All the central banks are probably going to collapse because they've all been at it. They've all been at printing money. They've all been at this riba and everything. They're all going to suffer. Pakistan's suffering. Lebanon is suffering. Venezuela is suffering. Italy is suffering. Malta's suffering. Sweden's suffering. All these countries. Australia.
The United Kingdom is suffering. The United
Kingdom is suffering the most, probably.
Australia is suffering.
Yeah, definitely.
The entire world is suffering. What's happening in Sweden?
In Sweden, there was some real estate company. I just found out about this yesterday. Some real estate company. They basically became I think possibly the fastest growing company in the history of Sweden. And the reason why that happened was because they managed to get some money, and then what they did was they went to the councils and to all the state institutions and bought all the real estate from the state institutions, so the hospitals, the council buildings, all of this kind of stuff, and then rented them back to the state institutions. So they bought this private company bought the building off the council and then rented it back to the council, right? So now they're making the money. So they became the fastest growing company in Sweden's history. They were doing really well for like 6-7 years, and then they've made a series of, it's a mixture of obviously hubris and ignorance. They've done a series of strategic blunders, and now they're about to go bust. and they've wrecked the economy in the process. They've wrecked the Swedish economy in the process because the state institutions were having to pay this company to run the country. And they've destroyed it. And then you look at like Reddit as well. Like Reddit is just, Reddit went dark yesterday because they've made these stupid moves. Again, it's a healthy balance of hubris and ignorance, and they've just screwed themselves over. And this is happening all over the world. So all these institutions are about to fail, and people are not going to know what to do. People don't know how to survive without WhatsApp or without Instagram or without Facebook or without
that's
Twitter.
one side. That's one side of it, and the other side of it is the human does know what to do. The human knows how to function. So,
but we haven't learned to tap into that.
Not yet, but then if everything crashes tomorrow, especially in the Muslim communities, like, tomorrow, everything's gone to shit. There's gonna the people will feed each other. They're not gonna turn on each other. There is a natural
Well, you see,
thing
you say that, and I'm sorry to always be the one that sounds very cynical and resentful and everything else to go with it. But for me, the what was emblematic of what is to come was what was going on in the pandemic. And in the pandemic, we had people fighting over toilet paper in this pandemic. They were coming to blows over toilet paper in this country. It was that pathetic, right? People weren't talking to each other. They were reporting each other to the police. They were fighting over trolleys. And it was just absolute chaos. And it was crazy. I'm telling you, it was crazy. And for me, as far as I was concerned, that was just a sign of things to come.
Well, then I have to use another example from South Africa again.
South Africa is much better in this regard.
Well, it's better in one sense and it's much worse in another sense. But in Durban 2 years ago,
those shopping malls,
3 years ago, there were massive riots, and it was insane, like entire.
But
shopping,
they were engineered,
not shopping.
I saw this.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the political backdrop of it in this conversation because I don't think the cause of it is not as relevant as what happened during it.
I know, but they just destroyed shopping malls, though, didn't they?
Yeah, but it was a lot worse than that. It wasn't just destroying shopping malls. It was like people's businesses, the local cash and carry, etc., etc. And what did the Muslims do? And not just the Muslims, actually. Muslims in particular, but all of the kind of different areas. They created basically their own militia. And they had people on the outskirts of their kind of communal living district. And anyone that tried to get in or out was not allowed unless they kind of given clearance. And it wasn't state. Even the police couldn't even enter.
Wow.
It was like complete
you wouldn't
protection.
You wouldn't be able to pull that off.
Right. And then, through the mosques, there was a network of people, the people that had cash and carries and had bread and stock of food or whatever, they handed it out to the families that needed food. And it was like what you saw is just a natural society emerging out of the crisis. And then the crisis disappeared and everything went back to normal.
But I think you're better set up for that. I don't think we're set up for that here in the UK at all. I don't think we're at all set up for that.
You're not.
No, we're not. We're absolutely not.
No, I've got a question for you.
You've seen what it's like, what life is like here.
I grew up there. I know the UK. That's my country. I was born there and I was raised there. And having been here for 16, 17 years, or at least based in South Africa and going back sporadically and seeing what's happened to the country, is like you see the stages of degeneration, and it's actually quite horrific.
Yeah, you see, probably notice it more. You get more contrast when you come. You see even more of an outside perspective.
Well, my point is, so I hadn't been to the UK since before lockdown,
right?
And then I went last year, and it was my first time back in the UK, and what shocked me massively was the fact that a packet of crisps cost £1.
That's just
and I'm
mad.
like, no, that's insane. That doesn't make any sense. Like a packet of crisps costs 20p. Like, how the hell can you charge £1 for a packet of crisps? And that for me was just like that was it. That was like I was like, now this country's finished. If a packet of crisps costs
I
£1
went to a
for
dentist,
real McCoys.
I went to a dentist a week ago, and he did 4 minutes of work on this tooth. 4 minutes of work, and he charged me £175 for for 4 minutes of work, and he said, "You got to come back next week, and I will, I'll actually extract the tooth next week." And I said, "Why can't you do it now?" Because I haven't got time. And he wanted another £200 for next week. So that's £375 for one little tooth. That tells you that this country is finished, because everybody's just ripping. You've got half of people just ripping everybody off because they're just taking advantage of their position, and the other half you've just got this flipping surge in prices, which is just insane.
Yeah, but the other side of it is that his rent's increasing and he has to pay his rent. His house mortgage is also like,
yeah. So everybody's
his kids are at private school.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
the price of the private schools increase and everything increases, right? And the price of fuel's gone up, so he needs to cover himself. And it's like,
but see, everybody's doing that. You see,
the trickle down effect.
Yeah, but I think, and that's the thing. The difference between this country and a country like South Africa, you have more of a community feel that everybody's got to look out for each other. In a country like the UK, it's everybody's for number one. It's a true capitalist way. You just look out for yourself. Just as long as just get enough. In the pandemic, it was just get enough toilet paper for yourself, right? And as long as you're okay, forget. You just got to fight for yourself. It's all about you. And that's what it's like over here. It's like, as long as you can keep your house running, nobody else matters.
Right. Now, if you're going to be a Muslim and you're going to talk like that,
that's what I'm saying.
Then you've lost your deen.
Yeah, that's exactly
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean.
So you can go and pray 5 times a day and whatever, but if you have no concern for your brother,
it doesn't mean anything. And the Bengali community sticks with the Bengali community, and the Pakistani community stick amongst their own, and the French community and the Polish, and everybody just sticks amongst their own. We actually had a mass exodus after the pandemic. Because what happened during the pandemic is that everybody went back to their families, everybody went back to there was a little bit of natural living, there was a little bit of just slowing down and breathing and getting a break from the rat race and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people that had come here to work, they just didn't have that support system. The neighbours weren't looking out for them or taking care of them, especially in London. Like in London, I lived in London for 7 years. To this day, I don't know the names of any of my neighbours that were there. I didn't know their names. I didn't know who they were. I never knew if somebody knew was moving in or somebody knew was moving out. Didn't know anything. And these people really started feeling alone. Because you can, on a day-to-day basis, you can distract yourself. Because you go to work and you go to the cinema and you go to the park and you do this and you do that. You're distracted. But when all of that stuff switched off, when all that consumerism switched off, there was nothing left. And so they just got up and left. It was like, I'm just getting out of here.
Well, I've got an interesting idea to play past you. So, a couple of years ago, well, it's been happening for a few years now, and is that I've had a lot of family members contact me to organize sheep for Qurban, right?
Yeah.
So, I get uncles and aunties and cousins and friends and stuff, and they'll phone me and they're like, "Look, can you organize some sheep for the Qurban, whatever, and you do it in my name?" The one year I slaughtered 70 sheep. 70 sheep.
You did it
yourself? Like a complete. Well, yeah, myself, my brother, some friends or whatever. You need some support, to go through 70 sheep. But we did it in one sitting. You do the prayer and you go out there and you just like silence of the lambs. I like to call it. But then, but it's also because they're my family, there's a personal relationship. I can make dua for them, I can make sure that it's done properly, it's clean, and it's on my word that this meat is going to be distributed properly and it's going to go to the right places and people are going to be fed that need the food, So I've done that for years and it's an honor and a pleasure to do it. But I was doing it, and then I was in the United Kingdom and I was talking to this very influential person in London. We were having a meal. And he was telling me about, the strength of the Muslims in the country and how the Muslims make up such a strong body. And, we've got like the mayor of London's Muslim. Now the First Minister of Scotland is Muslim. And, this one's Muslim and that one's Muslim. I'm like, yeah. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, Muslims make up the backbone of the country. The only problem is, so the Muslims don't know their own strength. And they're like, "Oh no, but we do." I was like, "No, they don't."
True.
I'm like, if you knew your own strength, then you would be able to slaughter sheep in the United Kingdom on Qurban time, because that is part of your sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ showed you.
We have to send money to Pakistan.
Instead, you're sending money to Pakistan, to South Africa, to other places, and there are people in the United Kingdom. There are Muslims that are hungry. and they are not getting that food,
Yeah.
and you're sending that food to other
Yeah,
places
yeah.
when you've got to support the people that
I
are
think
right next
I think
to you.
there was a figure that was calculated. I think it was something, I can't remember what the figure was, and it was a big number. I think it was something like £100 million a year comes from them, and I think it was the Muslim community a year, especially in Ramadan, gets generated, and all of that money goes abroad to Syria and to Yemen
I mean,
and everything. And I
one
think,
thing is it going abroad, which is one thing, but the other thing is why is it that
yeah,
a
that's what I'm
Muslim
saying.
man
Yeah.
cannot slaughter a sheep on Eid? It's our sunnah. Why do we have to break our sunnah, right? Because the state says no, it's bad to kill animals, it's not fair, it's not nice. When slaughtering a sheep
Yeah.
is one of the most when you do it, and this is on another note of masculinity, which is for a man to do it himself, it does something to you as a
Yeah.
human being.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
you realize that it's literally as it is with the sheep. It's that easy with the human being.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
someone could come up to you and just
Yeah.
and
It makes you
know,
recognize the value of it.
your blood's coming out, and you see life in a different
Yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one aspect on the masculinity, and also then, you know, just being able to show, I mean, your children that this is where your food comes from. You
But
know,
men
if
don't
you're
have.
gonna
You see,
eat
like,
lamb chops.
men today, as a man in South Africa, you still have a little bit more agency. But in the West, in a place like the UK, men don't have any agency. You know, they don't have this concept of I want to be able to do this, so I can just go and do it. There's 100 things in the way, and the ribeye is a massive is the root cause of all of that, because ribeye is what's stopping you from getting these things.
My point is the Muslims not seeing their
Yeah,
own strength.
definitely.
Because the reality is that the United Kingdom, if we just take the United Kingdom, it's a Muslim country. It's a Muslim country. The backbone of the country is Muslim.
Yeah.
All of the best doctors, all of the best engineers, all of the best lawyers,
All of the bankers
all
are
of the
Muslim
best
even.
businessmen.
Even the bankers are
Yeah,
Muslim.
I mean, that's another story. But I mean, it's like without the Muslims, if you kicked all the Muslims out of the country would collapse overnight.
Yeah, maybe it could happen. Yeah.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
But we only make like
Definitely.
2 or 3% of the country, as far as I remember. I think we only account for about 2 or 3%. But we
Yeah,
are.
but
the
it comes
Muslims
from
are
the-
in very important positions.
Because there's just part of our upbringing and everything is you work hard, you do your thing, you study, you make yourself more knowledgeable,
Yeah.
etc., and you know that's part of our culture. The best gangsters are also Muslim
Are they?
because in their blood they've just got this fear of they don't have that same fear of death. And in a way, sometimes I sometimes I feel that the gangsters are the more interesting people because at least they've got some.
Well, I'll tell you a story. So where I live here in Nottingham, because I live in Nottingham, and there's an area.
Shottingham.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm going to speak about. There's a part of Nottingham which is not too far from town, which used to be known as Shottingham, and that was the reason why Nottingham got known as Shottingham, right? Because there was a lot of shootings there, a lot of people shooting each other, and there was gang warfare and there was crime and all this kind of stuff, and that was all up until like the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And even the police was afraid to go there. And nobody wanted to, you couldn't even buy, you could buy a shop, a retail unit for probably like 5 or 10K, but nobody would do it because who's going to come to your business? Who's going to come? Nobody wants to be in that part of town, right? And then what happened was you had these immigrants that came over, which I believe were the Kurds, the Kurdish people, right? They came over, and they came over in groups, right? So, brothers and uncles and nephews and all that kind of stuff. They came as groups. And they still have this concept of you look out for each other, you defend each other. They have all that thing going on. They and obviously when you're coming from a place like that, you don't have a lot of money. You just bring whatever you can. They came in and bought these properties, and the people that were doing all the shooting and all of that, they fought with them and they addressed them and they dealt with them and they just dealt with them. And now you've got restaurants there, you've got takeaways there. You've got dessert parlors there and everything, and it's not like kind of fine dining or anything, right? But it's bustling, and they got these properties for really cheap, right? And they're now raking it in, and now it's like takeaway central, and everybody's going there, and it's just because these guys moved in and just took over the place and just dealt with them.
Well, look at that. You were asking me earlier about the wolf man. There
Yeah,
you go. You
yeah,
brought in a pack of wolves, and in the shortest amount
yeah,
of time, Shottingham was
yeah.
thriving
But it,
again.
but it's
But
taken
it's that.
it's taken a man from outside of England to do it. You see, the men in England are not doing this.
But what is it about those Kurds? They'd all been off to war. They've
Yeah,
all fought. They've all been
yeah,
on the battlefield.
yeah,
They know what it means
yeah. This
to
is
lose
child's
your
play for them in
life,
comparison.
right? And so
Yeah,
there's just some little dodgy guys in Nottingham.
yeah.
Like, what are these guys? We take them out for
Yeah,
breakfast.
that's what I'm
I mean,
saying.
I actually, and there was this. Last time I was in Nottingham, I was taken to my friend Jawad. He wanted to wash his car, so he took it to the to the Kurdish
Yeah. And they
car
do a
wash
wonderful
guy.
job.
And we got on I got on with this guy like a house on fire, and
Yeah.
you can see in his eyes. I mean, this guy is he's mean.
Yeah.
He's seen things, he's done things, but like you treat him with nobility,
Yeah.
and like
And
the
you
way
see
he
it in the
serviced
eyes.
that car.
The
Yeah,
guy over here who runs one of the key takeaways over here, it's takeaway slash restaurant that's doing that does really really well. And you see the guy and he's in there, and when you can see in his eyes, this guy has overcome a lot of fears, and he's had to deal with a lot of things, and he's risen to the challenge, and he's probably only a little bit older than me, maybe a couple of years older
right.
than me. He's got his family, and he's running the place, and I in that that kind of a person, that kind of a business person, I respect as well. Fine, it's not fine dining. There's a lot of there's a lot of things. That fall short in a lot of ways, but you've got to respect the man for what he's achieved.
You just reminded me of this thing that happened to me on Hajj. So we were walking down from the Haram back to our hotel, and there was just how there's hundreds of thousands of people everywhere, and there was just this one Afghan man, and like he must have been in his 50s, 60s, like, and you just looked at his face and you could see that he was just like, I mean, this was a warrior, and this is a man that has seen things, man, done things, and there's no messing around with this man. Like, you could read it straight across his face, and our eyes, connected, and he looked me straight in the eyes, and then he just smiled,
Yeah, it's the most
and it was
majestic
like
smile.
this. Oh, it was this smile. Like every time I recount this, I start getting goosebumps because it was just like the most beautiful man in front of me, and I'm like, that's who we need to be, so that you are you are a wolf, but at the same time, you're a puppy,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah,
And that's what I saw in this man. It was like this warrior that just, his love for another Muslim,
yeah.
just there in his eyes, and he's on Hajj and whatever, and we're both on Hajj and we're both going through this experience, and it was just a transmission of pure,
Yeah.
unadulterated love.
I
And I
remember
don't know
when
the
I
guy.
went on Hajj, there was we had to go through this tunnel. It was me and my dad. When you go for the stoning of the shaitan,
Yeah, yeah,
and it was like 100,000 people going this way and 100,000 people coming back through this tunnel, and
Yeah.
it was really hot. We both had a fever, and we were struggling to walk and everything. And there was these guys dispensing some water. And my dad goes, "Oh, why don't you go and grab some bottles of water?" Because they were just dishing them out. I went to get the water,
yeah.
turned around, lost my dad. Right, and
Yeah.
I just couldn't find him. I couldn't find him for the next 3 or 4 hours because just lost him in the sea of people. He couldn't find me. I couldn't find him. Didn't realize that it would have been that bad. And I went and did the ritual that I needed to do and everything. And the problem that I had was, I think at this time I was about 19. Problem that I had was I only had 5. I think it's rial, isn't it? The Saudi currency. I only
Yeah.
had 5 rial on me. Right. My dad had the wallet. He had the money. And I was 16 kilometers away from our the apartment from where we were staying, and now I've got to get home and I've got a fever and I'm hot and I've got no money to buy food, barely any money to buy food, and I haven't got money to pay for a taxi to get home, and I'm thinking, what do I do? And I just went and sat on some, after I'd done the stoning and everything. I went and sat on some steps, and this elderly gentleman, in a very similar way to what you describe, you can tell this guy has seen things. Very noble kind of fella. He just came and sat next to me, and and I think he must have sensed that I was nervous and I was kind of, I was anxious. came and sat next to me, and he said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, he goes, "Oh," he goes, "Are you from the UK?" I said, "How do you know?" And he goes, "Oh, I can tell from your shoes. You're wearing Reebok," as if that was the thing that can
Yeah.
denote where you're from. But he was like, I said, "Okay," and he goes, "Would you like a cup of tea?" And I was embarrassed because I had such little money, I didn't want to have to pay for it. And he just knew. It's like, he goes, "Don't worry, I'm going to get the tea. Would you like some?" I said, "Okay, yeah." So he gets me a cup of tea, and we're drinking the tea, and he's just talking, just small talk, but it was so comforting. I can still remember the man's face. This was like 25 years ago, and he goes to me, he goes, when on your way home, he goes, "Look," I says, "Look, I've only got 5 riyal. I need to get home. What do I do?" And he goes, "5 riyal is enough. Just when you're walking, whatever offer they make you, just say no." And then he goes, "Eventually they will give in, and they will tell you just sit on the roof of one of the vans, and you'll be fine." He goes, "They'll get you home." So that's what I did. I just I was walking, and they kept saying, "Oh, brother, aki, 20 riyal, 25 riyal, 50." I said, "Nope, nope. I've only got five. I've only got five." He goes, and then eventually, the guy relented. Because there was so much traffic, I was actually walking faster than the van was going. Right, so he kept having to
Yeah.
catch up to me. And then eventually he goes, "Look," he goes, "Okay, give me the 5 riyal, and you can go on the roof." I just got on the roof and I got home. But I still remember that
Well,
man to this day.
that's a perfect example of what I was trying to say earlier
Yeah, the
about
resourcefulness.
when
Yeah,
you travel,
yeah,
and
yeah,
when you travel and you're in those situations, and Hajj is the prime example.
yeah,
Allah just lays out a red carpet for you.
yeah,
But you have to go through it. You have to lose your father. You have to feel nervous. That man has to. You're in that state of nervousness. Allah sends you that man
yeah,
to bring you a cup of tea,
yeah,
just to
exactly.
give you a bit of comfort, and then give you the solution to your way home.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is just follow the path. But like it is on Hajj, it is in everything else in life. And if you look back on your life, and you look through that lens of seeing that Allah is the one that's in power, and you are just like an ant on a Persian carpet,
Yeah, yeah.
and you look back at your life, and you will see how everything links back, and how you've been looked after in every single occurrence,
Yeah.
in every single event in your life.
But you
And
are
you can
attracting me
reflect
towards
on
South
it.
Africa, though. I have to say. I mean, what you're saying, that kind of sense of uh, the space for the wolf man to be, present, and that kind of sense of community, and the Muslims coming together, and the resourcefulness and everything. That's very
Okay,
attractive.
okay, yeah, but just take it with a pinch of salt, because
There are issues.
there isn't it. Yeah, because I mean, when I talk about the wolf men, there's also hyena men. There's a lot of hyenas out here, and there's a lot of other.
I mean, this
There's
is what
hawks,
this
there's
is.
eagles,
These are the
there's sharks, there's
yeah.
things after you,
Yeah, yeah.
So
This is the complaint of the men now in Pakistan, for example. I mean, I've met men that are from the army in Pakistan, and you think, "Oh, this is a wolf man," and unfortunately they're hyenas. You know,
well,
unfortunately.
that's the other thing, because it's like, when you remove the wolf, then what else comes in to fill in the gaps?
Yeah.
Right? So, and then so you need to, yes, come to South Africa, but then you need to be in the company of wolves that are going to protect you and bring you into the wolf pack, you
Yeah.
know? So that's the other side. But Bismillah, welcome, If you're coming with pounds, then you can live very, 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 very nicely here.
Might have to try it.
It's on the subject of the collapse of the Mughal Empire.
Right.
And I think it's very important for the young Muslims of the United Kingdom to understand. And I'm not talking about my generation and older, because our generation and older are set in a certain mindset and set in a certain way. But for the next generation that's coming through, they need to understand something of critical importance. And that is that at the end, so at the death of Aurangzeb, Rahimullah, who was the last great Mughal empire, then that's when the Europeans started to sneak their tentacles into India. And that the Mughal empire still tottered on in a lesser sense for another 150 years after the death of Aurangzeb. And that led up to the last Mughal emperor called Bahadur Shah Zafar. And he's actually one of my ancestors.
Really?
From my Nani's
lineage.
Firstly, this is the last political leader of the Muslims of the subcontinent in the with the legitimate inheritance and the legitimate position of Padshah. The British slaughtered his sons in front of him.
Astaghfirullah. I didn't know that.
Right? They put him in jail and left him there to rot in Burma. The way they treated this man was horrendous. It's like the most degrading, disgusting way you can possibly treat any man, let alone the emperor. Right? But regardless of that, what happened after the deposition of Bahadur Shah Zafar was in court, in the Mughal court, there was ulama and there was the political leadership. There was the emperor and his ruling class around him, and there were the ulama, who were the knowledgeable men of the deen, of the the sciences, you name it. But they were distinct, and the emperor kept the ulama in check. Now, what happened after the deposition of the last Mughal emperor is a grouping of that ulama went to Deoband, and another grouping went to Barelv. And so this split that happened on an ideological level happened at the point at which the political leadership was removed, and the ulama then started to try and rise into this position of into the political space, and I know better, I know better, I know better, I know better, and that's the beginning of this division between the Deobandis and the Barelvis. Right. It's a modern phenomenon. It was never there in the subcontinent before, because you had people that saw things in a certain way and you had people that saw things in another way, but the political decision was made by the man who had political power. Now, what we have now today is we have all of this leadership by ulama. And of course, as Muslims, we hold the ulama in high respect, because these are the men that contain the knowledges. And we love them for it and we respect them for it. But they are in positions of knowledge, not in positions of power.
Before we continue on this video, I just want to invite you to my Discord community. Look, the world has changed, and it is changing still. And on my Discord, which is a simple mobile app that you can use, you can stay in touch with other like-minded people like me who are staying informed of the things that are happening around the world that are going to affect our daily lives very, very soon. So come and join me on my Discord community, and let's grow together and let's navigate this changing world order together.
And what the Muslims are lacking today, and this has been a process that started with the deposition of Sultan Abdul Hamid II in 1920.
No, his deposition
1908.
His deposition was 1908.
His deposition was 1908,
Yeah.
but he died in the 1920s.
Yeah.
But in 1908,
And the actual
right?
empire was ended in... I mean, the empire was officially ended in, say, I think it was 1923, but unofficially it was already done with by 1911, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
So what we have been lacking as Muslims, as a grouping of people, since 1908, is political leadership. Now, this is something that since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, all the way up until 1908, wherever there were Muslims, there was political leadership above ulama, and it was their responsibility to govern and to establish zakat, to make sure that the weights of the coinage was in check, to make sure that there was jihad done once a year, to make sure that it was certain that when the time came for Ramadan, the big man said, we're doing it this day, and everyone had to do it that day. You know, there was no and if you decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to do it on another day, there were ramifications. You know, because they were there to keep things in check. What we have today, the Muslims have become divided. They're chasing after money. They're chasing after all of this waham. And the thing that's lacking is the leadership. So you will have more division and more division and more division. And now it's not just Barelvi and Deobandi. Then you've got all the cultural aspects.
Yeah.
Oh, that's the Albanian mosque. That's the Afghan mosque. That's
Yeah.
the Kashmiri mosque.
Yeah.
That's the Punjabi mosque. That's the other mosque, other mosque, other mosque. And it's all divisive. Whereas what is needed is the rise of outward leadership. And that's what the Muslims are lacking. Because, like, if we come back to the wolf pack, the wolf pack has an alpha male, but the alpha male, again, in the wolf pack, you have to, if you study wolves, it's actually very interesting, because the alpha male does absolutely nothing. He's just there to keep everything in order, and to make sure that the youngsters don't eat before him, and to make sure that everyone's doing what they're supposed to do. But when it comes to protecting the pack, he's there at the forefront, you know, and he's there defending everyone from whatever happens. And then on another subject, which is also interesting, is that even the term of alpha male, the alpha male doesn't exist. You know, there's this whole ideology today is, oh, you've got to be an alpha male, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But the alpha male, I remember having this conversation with my guide and mentor, Sheikh Abdul Qadir. And he says, I don't understand this thing that people talk about, the alpha male, the alpha male. It's like, look at nature, there's no alpha male. I said, the alpha male is only when it comes to breeding.
What does that mean?
Only when it comes. It means that the male only asserts his dominance over the other males when it comes to breeding.
Right.
And I mean, that's if that's not in line with the human creature as well. It's like you deal with other men all the time. It's not that you're better, or you're stronger, or you're more manipulative, or you're more commanding over another man. No. But when it comes to messing with your wife, yeah. You know, don't mess with my wife. Don't mess with my children. It's breeding. That's my lineage, and I'm going to protect my lineage and make sure, and you know, and they're under my I protect them. But when it comes to everything else in life, it's not. I don't need to go into a board meeting and assert myself as I'm better than you. I'm stronger. I'm bigger. I'll mess you up. Whatever. No, it's not. That's not how it works in real life.
Although there's a lot of, unfortunately, there's too much of it that's going on. That's the problem. There's a lot of this.
Yeah, but what is it? But what is it in reality? In reality, it's ego.
Yeah, of course it's ego.
Big,
it's wanting to assert dominance.
I'm insecure about how strong I am.
Yeah.
Because in reality, I'm a slave that's paying off my mortgage and paying off my car finance and paying off my credit card bill, and I'm like drowning in debt, and I have absolutely no power at all because I have sold myself to the devil. And so now I'm going to fuel my insecurity by.
There's too many people that feel like that, you see like people, you get keyboard warriors online, you get people fighting with each other, right? Somebody's making a point, and the one thing that people will always come back with, and especially men do this: go and get a real job, do something with your life, get a real job. As in, like, that's the ultimate, that's the sign of nobility. Is if you've got a job and you're paying your mortgage, then that's what makes you a man. This is what I've been saying right from the beginning. That entire concept of that is upside down. It's completely wrong. But that's the kind of the thing the current that you're always fighting against.
Well, I don't fight against it.
Good.
If people want to,
you're the people of Sheikh Abdul Qadir. That's why he was a. You had an example. You had an example in front of you about how things could be done instead of how they have to be done. That's the difference that you had.
But you posted that amazing video yesterday of the tiger and the donkey.
Yeah.
Oh, that was absolutely brilliant.
I know it's funny, is because there are things that happen in my personal life always, right? And then what happens is, there's so much stuff that's going on around me always. Like my life, honestly, the last 5 years of my life are worthy of a Hollywood story. They really are. Not Hollywood, maybe Bollywood, right? I've got a lot of drama in my life. A lot of toxic people around me. I've got a lot of constraints. There's been a lot of kind of things that have just come together that have put me. It's like the irony of ironies, right? So there's a lot of irony in my life at the moment. If you saw what my life was like when my life started, and how much promise I showed as a young kid and as a teenager, and you see what my life is like now, somebody who met me as a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. And you see where my life is now, like that person would probably pass out from the shock of, there's no way that this is where your life has ended up. There's a lot of things that are happening in my life. But when I get these events, these episodes that happen, for some reason, it's the serendipity of it all. I'll always come across something, a Twitter thread, an Instagram reel, or a quote or a post or something that will speak to the very thing that's going on in my life, that will teach me this is how you should have responded in this situation, or this is how you should respond in the future. And so that was actually speaking to something very important. The reason why I put it up was because something had happened the day before, and I shouldn't have spoken in that moment. I should have just kept my mouth shut. As the guy was describing in that video, the tiger doesn't speak. And I'm not saying I'm a tiger or I'm a lion. I'm not saying any of these things. But the idea is that if your intentions are to be noble and courageous and those kind of things, then I should have just kept my mouth shut. And I spoke.
I am saying I am saying that I am a wolf, and I am calling people out there in the world. If you want to join my wolf pack, Bismillah, welcome.
Bismillah.
Come on
And
board.
do it, yeah.
Go to my website, go to my course, go to whatever, come on board, Bismillah.
Yeah.
Whatever I charge for my things, what you are going to get, I don't even charge for hardly anything, only my course, but whatever you're going to get in return, I promise you is going to be,
Inshallah,
exponentially more valuable than any pounds. Well, the pounds isn't worth anything, so.
But yeah, so this is what I'm saying, it's like, so I always end up finding something that kind of just there's a guy on Twitter, I can't remember his name even, Mikhail something, and he comes online, he comes on Twitter, he does a few tweets, and then he disappears. You won't see him tweet for like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Then he'll come back online, he'll do a tweet, and every tweet that he does is so profound. So sometimes he'll do a Twitter thread, and it'll be very profound. And he did a Twitter thread. Tweet thread, I think about 3 weeks ago now, and he talked about the irony that he goes, the irony is like one of the most important things for human beings. Like, is he goes, life is always full of ironies, and that's like what kind of it transforms you as a human being. It's like you look at the king, the king becomes the beggar. That's the irony. He was a king and now he's become a beggar. Or the strong becomes the weak, or all these things. And he goes, it's through the irony that you start to grow as a human being, because it's there to teach you something, right? It was a very interesting thread anyway, and I thought, well, that really spoke to like my life, really, like what's going on in my life right now. And he goes, but then eventually you get to the end, and the end starts where the beginning you end up at the beginning kind of thing. It's like quite circular. I thought, well, that's really interesting.
Well, the reality is that whatever's happening in your life, whatever it is, good or bad, you've created.
Yeah, of course,
you've brought it to you.
Yeah.
And it's this famous thing that my mentor once again said to me. He said that the murderee, the murdered finds the murderer.
Yeah.
So it's like whatever it is in the person that gets murdered.
Yeah.
They've brought the murderer to them, and if that's the case in like something as hectic as that, then whatever's happening in your life, you've brought it to you.
Yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, you can change the way you see that event. And I mean, that's like what I see. What you're saying to me is that then you get like the guidance from wherever it comes from, a person.
Then you understand how to
post
understand the event.
whatever.
Yeah. You understand how to interpret
and then you can reflect on yourself and then change yourself and do it differently.
Yeah.
And like what I mentioned, the last part of my course being these the fourth part being these 10 principles of the heroic way, and each one of those principles is that to be perfect in any of those principles is basically not going to happen. But as long as you're aspiring to that thing, you're going to draw towards you people that also aspire to those same things. And then when you're doing it as a group, is that becomes very powerful. So, I mean, I'll give you them really quickly. It's that there's the first 5 and the second 5. It's spontaneity, virility, passion, enthusiasm, and trust. Those are the first 5. And then the second 5 are largesse, which is generosity on steroids. Prowess, being the best at whatever you do.
Very good.
Courtesy, which is just adab.
Yeah.
If you want to call it by what I'm actually calling to. Frankness, which is being frank and speaking the truth.
Yeah.
And forthright, speaking, your truth, speaking the truth. And when you speak, it becomes truth. So that whatever you say you're going to do, you bloody well do it because you said you're going to do it. And that used to mean something to man. You know, you go to Afghanistan and somebody says, I'm going to do this, it's done. You know it's done because they still have that.
I had somebody offer me
And
a
then
house in Afghanistan. He still probably means it. He offered me a house there.
Yeah. And if you, and that's, he means it. And then the last one is loyalty.
Yeah.
Which is something that I feel.
Well, it sounds like a very interesting cause. I think a lot of people are looking out for this stuff now. They want like some sort of direction. They don't want to just keep doing NLP courses and, you know, all this other namby-pamby stuff that the corporates are paying thousands of pounds for. They want something that they can really feel like they can go back to their fitrah, or they can really feel like they can go back to their essence as a man. Men need and want that. They need experiences of where they can do those kind of things. You know, the men the outlet for men these days is Xbox games and PlayStation games and driving cars really fast. But men need some sense of adventure every day, some sense of achievement and accomplishment. Of course. The thing with the sacrificing of the sheep and the lambs for you, all men should be doing that on a regular basis. They need that all the time.
Well, I also feel that men should be hunting. And so what I'll say to all the brothers out there in the United Kingdom is that if you've got a little bit of extra cash, book yourself, get in contact with me, get 2 or 3 of your friends together, book yourself a flight to Cape Town. We will look after you and we will go hunting. Yeah. And we will drop some animals and we will skin those animals, we will gut those animals and we will eat those animals. And before we shoot them, we will say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. And that we know that meat is halal. We'll take one of the legs, we'll cook it there, we'll take the livers and we'll cook it there, and we will eat well and we will be in good company. And the rest of the sheep, the rest of the springbok or the kudu or whatever animal you shoot, we'll cut it up, we'll cook it, and we'll feed the people. And then you get back on your plane and you go back to wherever you came
That for men 100 years ago, 200 years ago, was an everyday kind of an experience. And now it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience. That's how much life has changed.
I'm telling you, with the current exchange rate, like my cousin, another cousin, right? So he contacts me and he says, you know, he's thinking of bringing his family down, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, come. And he's like, so I was like, what do you want to do? And he says, I want to do safari. I want to do this. I want to do that. Where's a nice place to stay? Whatever. I say, cool. So he says, contacts me and he's like, what's the best place to do safari? I'm like, okay, well, look, you can either fly to the other side of South Africa and do it like full on, or there's a farm nearby which is going to be easier if you're coming with the kids. You know, you go there, it's 5-star, it's luxury, it's beautiful, and you get to see all the animals and you'll have a great time. He's like, okay, cool, send me the stuff. So I send him the link to that one place just outside Cape Town, which is also halal, run by, it's a Muslim institution, you know, it's a Muslim farm, everything's halal, it's wicked. And he says back to me, he's like, bro, like, why is it so cheap?
Yeah.
If it's like, you said it's like 5-star and whatnot. I'm like, what do you mean? Why is it so cheap? It's flipping 5,000 rand a night. It's like, that's a lot. That's expensive here.
How much is that in the UK?
No, it's like 180 quid.
Oh, is it?
Right, for a chalet for your whole family with the kids.
For 5 nights?
No, that's one night. Okay. But I mean, it's like...
But it's still cheap.
You're coming from the UK. I mean, I'm telling. This is what I said to my cousin. I was like, "Look, you got to get on the plane. The plane takes a long time. You know, it's a 12-hour flight direct from London.
That's the issue.
And it's going to be, maybe it gets a bit expensive, especially if you're, you know, whatever. But once you're here, I can assure you that spending 2 weeks in Cape Town is not even like, and you can stay in a very nice hotel and eat very nice food. And live a very nice life. You can have a driver and a gardener and a maid and a nanny and whatever you want. And that is not even going to cost you the equivalent of what you spend
on the flight.
2 weeks of grocery shopping in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, it's just mad at the moment. It's just mad. It really is mad.
Yeah. And I mean,
we have
all
this thing called shrinkflation as well now. So like where you used to get 5 apples in a bag for say a pound, now you get a bag of apples for £1, but they're not 5 apples, they're 4 apples. So they do it that way as well. They get you that way now as well.
No, they're just screwing everyone, and they're just taking advantage, man. Yeah. And so I'm calling to people. I'm like, come out here, come out here, get in contact with me. I'm very easily contactable, and like organize a trip with the guys. It's better if it's just lads, you know, and you have a company like male company. I don't know. It's like, and you can still do that toxic shit. You know, like, I'm not saying that I haven't changed nappies. I have. And I'm not saying that I don't sometimes get stuck in my domestic situation. I have. You know, we all live in this time, you know. But at the same time, it's imperative that we spend time as men doing manly stuff, and just like keeping in the company of men. Just sitting around a fire, talking rubbish, making jokes, and eating meat. You know,
Just
what
do
do
the
you
carnal
want in
stuff,
life?
basically. You need wildness.
Yeah, I mean,
this is what Breeze was
really-
saying yesterday, that you need wildness. You know, men need wildness. You need to do stuff that's just wild. But wild doesn't mean like, you know, zina and all these kind of things, you know, sowing your wild oats. Wild means, you know, being with nature and just being primal.
Okay,
about
so
things.
I'm gonna tell you about my last weekend.
Yeah.
One of my friends moved to this tiny little village in the middle of the flipping desert.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a 4-hour drive from Cape Town, and he moved there a couple of months ago. And he phoned another friend of ours and said, like, you know, I'm staying here. There's you know, it's a beautiful place. Why don't you come and visit, and we do like a small dhikr or whatever, and we just chill. So I say, okay, cool. Phone, you know, the message gets around, whatever. We had 20 guys there, right? We all drove up on the Friday. Some drove up on the Friday afternoon. Some drove up on the Saturday morning. We take a 4.5-hour drive into the middle of nowhere. We chill there in this guy's house. We made a lekker fire. You know, we got the meat going all the time. It's just meat constantly coming off the, what we call braai, off the barbecue. And we got like 20 men there. And it's just company. Yeah, we did a little bit of dhikr, recited some Quran and did some wazifas or whatever, you know, in the evening. But that was nothing. That was like an hour and a half. The rest of the time is just chilling, drinking coffee, eating meat, talking rubbish, going for walks, going up to the mountain, going for a swim in the ice cold river, and just being in the company and having a great time. And so, like, for anybody that wants to come out, welcome, come, bismillah, come. All you have to do is get on that flight.
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, maybe the flight's difficult, but once you get off that plane, I promise, whoever comes, whoever wants to take this, accept this invitation, you will have an amazing time.
Inshallah.